Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today we have an episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to pick a gun and customization for me to use in Battlefield 1. The way you do this is you leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of weapon and accessories you would like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for the next episode. Today's top comment comes from Who Are You, who says the Simo Hayha White Death Loadout. The Mosin-Nagant is the primary, naked, as in we're using no optics. Then we're going to use the Nagant revolver, any gadget, any hand grenade, and any melee weapon. You did a loadout about him on Battlefield 4, but now let's use the authentic weapons. Play only on winter maps. And it's true, I do remember doing this Simo Hayha Loadout in Battlefield 4. It was really interesting learning about this guy because he's like probably one of the most decorated or impressive snipers in war history, with a body count of over 500, and not just 500 but 500 in a short period of time during the war in which Russia invaded Finland in 1939. It was winter, he was fighting in sub-zero conditions, he was fighting with a Finnish version of the Mosin-Nagant, a Finnish variant of this weapon, so close enough in terms of what we're using in Battlefield 1. And he got around on skis and basically was wearing all white in the snow, and so he got the nickname White Death. And what's particularly interesting about his sniping technique versus other well-known snipers in history is that he preferred to use iron sights because the glint from the scope could give him away, not to mention scopes were generally mounted a bit higher than iron sights, so he would have to position his head a little bit higher up, exposing more of his body. So he preferred to use the iron so that he could make himself as small of a target as possible when peeking over rifts in the snow. And he would have continued to fight throughout the rest of the war, however he was hit by an exploding Russian round in the face, which actually took off most of his lower jaw, and he woke up in the hospital and the war was over. Finland had defended themselves. Simo died at the age of 96 in the year 2002, so his legacy is impressive to say the least. It's an incredible war to think about because Russia was invading with tanks, over 1 million soldiers, lots of technology, overwhelming firepower, and the Finns fought them off with skis and white camouflage in the forest in the dead of winter. Very impressive, very crazy to think about. Now, let's see how it actually plays out in Battlefield 1. We've got a Mosin-Nagant, the closest thing we can get to what Simo was using during the war. According to his diary, he was also using a submachine gun, so I don't know if the Nagant revolver was part of what he was carrying around. He might have had a little SMG and then his Mosin-Nagant, but since we can't really replicate that in Battlefield 1, this is just fine. Now, as for the primary Mosin-Nagant, this weapon was added during the Russian DLC, and it is nearly identical to the Russian 1895 lever-action sniper rifle as well. Very few differences other than the reloading mechanics of this rifle, and also the fact that the Mosin does not come with a higher powered magnified optic, which the Russian 1895 does. If you didn't get the Russian DLC or the Mosin-Nagant, you're not really missing out that much. It's a decent rifle without question, but the lack of optics on the infantry variant of this one does make it a bit tricky to work with. It was fun though, trying to make it work with the iron sights and sort of feeling that elite sniper vibe. Now, as much as I wanted to exclusively play on winter maps, I did have to mix one desert map in here on Suez Canal. The rifle performed really well on Suez, although it did force me into close quarters a bit more. You're not really going to get any benefits with using this rifle in close quarters, obviously. The sweet spot mechanic on this rifle starts at 60 meters and ends at 100 meters, so you really have to hit your targets far away. The iron sights don't help out too much with that situation, because if you hit an arm shot or a leg shot at that range, you're not going to get the sweet spot one-shot kill. So it makes this gun tricky to use. Fun to use, yes. Tricky, very much. One nice thing about this rifle though is it has one of the fastest rate of fires for any of the sniper rifles that still possess a sweet spot mechanic, so you can be somewhat aggressive with it if you need to. As for the sidearm, the Nagant revolver, I gotta say is probably one of my least favorite sidearms. It's a 3-shot kill revolver, very, very slow reload. I just don't really see any benefit in using that weapon over something like the 1911 or really any other revolver. The Nagant revolver is hard to use, and if you end up missing your shots and you need to go for the reload, forget it. The reload is like probably one of the longest revolver reloads in the game. Perhaps it'll balance out in the next weapons patch, which is coming at some point this month, but for the time being, it really is just a non-fun revolver to work with. And if you're playing the scout class, which needs to rely on its sidearm a lot, I would recommend picking something that you're going to enjoy a bit more. The Nagant revolver is just a throwaway gun at this point. Now, as for play style with this class, I would not recommend using it at extreme ranges just because the irons are going to be difficult. I mean, you can hit those extreme long range shots and they feel amazing when you do hit them, but really you're going to want to try and play on the close range side of the sweet spot as much as possible. So between 40 and 60 meters is probably the most ideal range for this weapon, so you can still hit your shots relatively consistently with the iron sights. Moving targets are going to be hard as they would be with any rifle, but the scoped rifles I feel give you just a better idea of how far you need to lead. The iron sight rifles with moving targets can be extremely tricky, so stationary targets can be a bit more ideal. This is not a weapon that you're going to want to use in a stand-up firefight where somebody's shooting back at you. It really helps to hang out with teammates, stay in the back lines a little bit, and take your shots unencumbered by suppression. You're going to need to use cover and whatever you have at your disposal to make sure that you're not being seen. Obviously, running without a sniper rifle glint is a major benefit on some of the bigger wide open sniper maps. Switching back over to a snow map, this is probably the best round I had on Galicia using this rifle. I wasn't trying to use it too much at extreme ranges. I was sort of being a semi-aggressive scout class, but again being very, very sneaky, not running out in the open too much, but sort of staying behind cover, going on flanks, trying to hit people from the side and whatnot to try and be as effective as possible. I really was missing a good percentage of my shots. You know, that's how it goes with any iron sight rifle, and you just kind of have to accept that and make up for it by taking a lot of shots. You really got to spam your target with fire, and I probably would hold a lot more of my shots with a scoped variant and only take the shots that I really thought I was going to hit. The major benefit of this map was the limited cover. So once I got myself into a covered position that had an angle on an enemy and I landed a shot, they really didn't have much in the way to run behind or get out of harm's way. They had to turn around, try and engage and defeat me. Otherwise, that was it. So I kind of put them in an ultimatum firefight situation a lot of the times. And that's how I was able to get a lot of these kills, as they just weren't on people that really had any sort of defensive option once they started taking fire. Once the behemoth came in, that really did start to disrupt the round. Not only did it clear out the air support on our side, but it just ended up killing a lot of our team with the artillery, and they started dominating us with vehicles. And at that point, I found myself dying a lot to vehicles and things that I couldn't really do too much about with this class. But when it was a primarily infantry only game mode, I was really excelling and just dominating. The gadgets I picked were the flare gun. That's something that I basically pick with every scout class. It's just insanely useful for clearing out buildings or shooting onto a point both aggressively and defensively when you're worried about where enemies might be. Infinitely useful gadget. Then I was using the K bullets as well because I knew I was going to probably run into a bunch of vehicles on this map. If it was an infantry only map though, I might consider switching it out to one of the tripwire bombs instead. Those are actually going to be considerably more effective when the next weapons balance patch comes around, as they're going to do increased damage on targets that are sprinting. So something to keep in mind. Overall though, I really did enjoy this loadout. It's not my preferred ideal loadout. I like a scope, preferably a marksman optic, which is sort of in between of irons and high powered optics, as it won't give you a scope glare. So I prefer that on most of my rifles. The rate of fire on the Mosin-Nagant is quite nice and does suit the iron sight mechanics. And despite its limited ammo capacity, it does have a fairly agreeable reload, so I didn't find myself having ammo troubles or reload issues too frequently. Sadly though, the revolver really didn't help this loadout, and it could have been a lot more enjoyable if I had a more enjoyable sidearm like the Obrez, the 1911, or just any of the other decent pistols. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Loadout. I always encourage you guys to try it out for yourselves and see what you think of it. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave your loadout comments down below, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.